guys, welcome to another episode of the e-commerce lab by Ecomcy, the place of everything related to Amazon, FBA, parallel, and e-commerce. My name is Vincenzo Toscano, founder and CEO of Ecomcy, your host today. And today we bring you a very special guest. His name is Pat Yates, which actually he works for Quite Light, but not only that, he has an amazing experience when it comes to e-commerce, being in the space for over 20 years. He was even featured in Shark Tank, which I'm pretty sure he's going to share a little bit about that journey as well. And the reason why I wanted to bring Pat today is we actually met in Mexico a couple of months back, and I saw his experience when it comes to helping businesses exit. And I think that's a very interesting topic that we're going to be touching today. Basically, how you can increase your valuation, what are some of the tips you can implement in 2023 for exit, and much more. So, Pat, it's a pleasure to have you here, my friend. How you doing?
That's good, man. That was a heck of an intro. I got to live up to that. I don't know if I have enough experience to be able to do that, but I appreciate it. I'm excited to be here today. It was great meeting you down there.
Thank you, bro. It's a pleasure to have you here. I think I definitely admire your journey so far in the commerce space and everything you have done, and it's very inspiring. And now what you're doing with Quite Light, which we're gonna be touching in a couple of minutes. But I think before we jump into that and the topic, I think I wanna pick a little bit your brain in terms of your background into the commerce space and how you actually even jump in the space in the first place. Because I'm pretty sure people is gonna find this very interesting and even inspiring for them. So maybe you can give us a little bit of that, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that if I go all the way back, I'm really old, so these people will be able to age me. But I started my first business actually in 1990 in
Wow.
Columbus, Ohio. It was a service-based business. Actually, was ironically a coffee company. So my first business, I actually had one man, one truck. I would sell accounts to offices and buildings and vending machines, and it was just me. And I was out trying to sell accounts, fill them. I just knew I wanted to have a business. Actually,
Yeah.
ironically, I lived in Louisville, Kentucky at the time where I live now before I went to Columbus. And my wife and I had been married just a few months. And I went home and told her I met a guy who was doing a franchise-based program in Columbus, Ohio for coffee, and that we were going to do that. And we were going to move there. It just was a decision I made. And she didn't, she'd never been to Columbus. We started that business. I sold it a couple of years after. We moved to Nashville,
Okay.
Tennessee after our first son was born, and I started an independent coffee company that wasn't a franchise, and I sold that one 2
Okay.
years later. And that's what led me to retail. I actually started doing kiosks in malls, like the early mid
Okay.
1990s, when it was really kind of a boom, excuse me, to have a kiosk in a mall. And
The
ironically,
ones in the middle, basically, the ones in the middle of the hall, you will say, right? Those
yeah,
ones.
it's a horrible business now. Nobody really you have to get the mall all the time, and malls now close whatever they want to. It's
I
weird.
know.
So anyway, but my father and his wife were kind of following my footsteps. They were looking to retire and they wanted to do some kiosks. They did a kiosk here in Louisville, Kentucky, where they found these slippers at the Atlanta Gift Mart.
Okay.
So they started Happy Feet Slippers with one kiosk in Louisville, Kentucky. I bought it in 2001 and ended up with almost 300 locations independently operated
Wow.
across the country. And that's kind of what built my ecom funnel. It's ironic because we put the name of the website, buyhappyfeet.com, on the back of the slippers. So whenever our independent operators would sell them, and they'd only run it for November, December, then they would close down and everybody would buy them on my site. So we sort of built.
Interesting.
We
Okay.
got on Amazon in 2008 or so. I did a license with Snooki, which was kind of by accident. That's an interesting story in itself.
Okay.
She was a fan of our product, wore it on Jersey Shore, and we got a lot of attention out of that. Then in 2014, I did Shark Tank, obviously, and
Wow.
that's really big.
Big fan of the show, by the way. It's very good and inspiring to be honest. Yeah.
If you want to fall asleep one night, you can watch my episode. It'll do that for you. It'll put you to sleep pretty
Nice.
quick. It does.
I will. I will check it out.
Yeah, so I did the Shark Tank, and then I did the update. I did Beyond the Tank, which was actually canceled. It was a terrible show. So I did all three. A few people that did that. And then if you fast forward into 2015, I met Mark Doust, who is the founder and president, or founder and CEO of Quiet Light, who is still involved in the business. And we discussed selling my company in 2015. But the biggest thing was we sort of struck up a friendship, and I stayed in touch with him. And then in 2020, when things were exploding with aggregators, he came back to me, said, Pat, he said, you've exited several businesses. You know what we do. I'd love you to come in and work with us and work with some of the best entrepreneurs in the world and selling companies. So I was fortunate enough to get involved with Quiet Light a few years ago. And even though I'd exited several businesses myself and I understood it, it's a whole different thing being on the other side. It's really good for me because I'm passionate about helping entrepreneurs exit their business. I'm not perfect for every person, neither is Quite Light, but we
Yeah.
take a very hands-on approach to being able to help entrepreneurs build and scale and exit their business. It's not always a race. So I started that, and I still own my Shark Tank ecom business, Happy Feet Slippers. And so I'm kind of a busy entrepreneur, but my main concentration is on Quite Light.
Wow, what entrepreneur, man. Yeah, love it. Love it. I mean, just the fact that you've been coming all this way, all these years, and you've been doing all these amazing projects like Shark Tank, your own business, even retailing, is like you have touched so many areas, you know. and
Well,
and I bet when it comes to doing
yeah,
the consulting for this business with Carla, you add so much value because you basically understand all these business units that most people that do only e-commerce will never have that kind of mindset. I bet that helps you a lot when it comes to identifying the right businesses for exit, right?
yeah, I don't think there's any question. And I tell you the thing about being an entrepreneur and doing what I've done. I've done licenses with Disney, with DreamWorks. We do NFL,
Mm,
Major League Baseball, and we've done retail, we've done kiosks, we've done online. Pretty much anything you can touch of selling goods, I've had a hand in at some point in the last 20 years. So what I try to do is just utilize that knowledge to really help people, build their business more than anything. The truth is, Quite Light, I probably list less than 5% of the businesses I talk to, but 95% of them or 100% of them, I try to actively help them understand
yeah.
how they can get better versus asking them just to list their business. So I probably do more free consulting than I do selling products. Really kind of what I
I
do.
bet. I
Yeah.
bet. Which is actually on that note brings me to my first question, which is, I mean, as you say, in 2020, we had this big explosion of private investors and basically aggregators coming into the game to basically buying all these Amazon brands. But we know the ecosystem when it comes to buying Amazon brands has been changing completely from 2020 to 2023. And basically, my first question for our audience today is basically if you can help us just bring to the table what are some of the key factors you've been seeing that now are driving the valuation for the Amazon businesses in 2023, because I feel like it's completely different compared to 2020. And now people that are investing into buy Amazon brands, they have a different completely like filter and scope when it comes to looking into a business. And maybe you can give us some insights about what are some of those key things investors are looking at when it comes to buying a business in 2023 for Amazon. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. And actually, if your listeners listen to multiple podcasts, since I told you I do the Quiet Light podcast about 3 weeks ago, I have to date this. We're in June right now, 23,
Yeah.
when this airs. About 3 or 4 weeks ago on the podcast, we did an update of what the market was from 2020 to 2023. It's very informative with two other
Mhm.
advisors, Brad Whalen and Chris Wozniak, as well as Joe Valley. And we talked about the market and the compare and contrast. So if they'd like to listen to that, I think it's a deeper conversation. From
Awesome.
a 30,000 foot view, the market is still okay. Aggregators were only about 30% of the business we sold. That's what people are sort of shocked at. In 2020,
Hmm.
21, it was only about 30%. 70% were individual buyers still, even when the aggregator boom was. But it was the larger volume or size of the businesses and stuff that they sucked up. What I think the aggregator model did, the people that actually sold in that and got like 5 and 6 offers hit like the perfect vacuum of timing, because there were so many people bidding for businesses because they were all flush with cash. Everyone had
Yeah.
hundreds of millions of dollars to spend. So they thought, well, if I spend another 50 to 100,000 more on a business, then it doesn't matter. I have the cash. The problem was they didn't realize they were overpaying on a multiple. So a lot of that, was hard to handle as far as buying at the high end of the market. That hurt the aggregator. The second thing that hurt the aggregator was not bringing along the owners. In hindsight,
Hmm.
that is probably the biggest problem, because while an aggregator thinks there's economies of scale and all these things we can do when we buy a company, they don't operate it like the owner does.
Yeah.
And they needed to keep those people. People know now the SBA regulations have now changed as of May, where you can roll equity and you could do seller notes. And honestly, I think that was a direct reaction to why the others failed, because I think the SBA realizes that the entrepreneur going forward, any kind of purchase might be a really big thing. So now they've changed their regulations. So how's the market different? It was really easy in 2020, 2021 to sell companies. Now it's more challenging. The business needs to be in a better position. There's really only two kind of businesses coming into us right now: flat or slightly up, or really on a decline. And most of them are on a decline. You've got tightening credit markets, which is really hurting a lot of entrepreneurs. That's a difficult situation for people to handle. I still believe that the market is good for good businesses. If you have one on a decline of 20 to 30%, you're going to get beat up if that's happened for the last 5 to 6 months. But You just have to be realistic about the multiple. When you talk about multiples, I think they're off maybe a quarter to a half point possibly. So if you were at 3.5 or 3.75, you're probably more like 3.25 or 3.5 now, depending on your sales trend. I've been talking more to entrepreneurs about digging in for another year, letting the market
Mhm.
get better and improving their businesses than I have listing them. And I feel like, and everyone at Quite Like does that. I mean, like some M&A firms, and there's a lot of great ones out there. I
Yeah.
don't begrudge anyone. They have to get business. They're looking to get listings. We're
Mhm.
more advising when the right time is because we're
Yeah.
all entrepreneurs like them and we still own these businesses. And a lot of times it's going to take more preparation in this market than it would at any other time. I don't know if that answers your question, but it's kind of a broad
Yes.
view.
Yeah, it does, of course, of course. And I think just quickly going back to the multiple, I think that's something that even when we talk with our clients, that's the number one thing that is basically making people like regretting not making that decision 2 years ago, 1 year ago, because they were comparing the multiples of when all that money had to be deployed because basically aggregators had to deploy the money, so they were overpaying. And now they're realizing that they're not getting the same multiples, and now they start thinking, oh, it's actually a bad moment to sell my brand. It's a good one. So that's why I see a lot of confusion, because they're trying to compare the current situation with what happened 2 years ago, which
Yeah.
2 years ago it wasn't really an ideal scenario. It was artificially inflated by all the money coming to the market, which didn't really reflect the reality of the markets, right? And on top of that, I think you also touched on something very interesting, which I want to go more in depth, which is timing. I feel like when people is doing very well with their business in terms of their brand, they're scaling and they're growing, that's where I feel that's usually the best moment to sell, because that's usually when you have your business with the best face forward. But I actually I want to hear your take on this, because actually I see founders when the opposite, when the business is going downward, so maybe they have tried everything and nothing work out, that's when they actually decide to exit, and maybe it's not the ideal timing for exiting. So what is your take on this when it comes to timing? When is the right moment for exiting?
Yeah. I mean, I think less about the value of the business and where it is financially in the sale when you're talking about timing, and more about the entrepreneur. At the day when the entrepreneur wakes up and says, I don't feel like doing this again anymore, it's
Okay.
definitely time to sell. But there are market driven things that could, move people in a position to sell. I just I never like to tell someone to list or not to list. It has to be a feeling the entrepreneur has. There's a
Okay.
certain amount of money you need. There's an aggravation tax to holding on any business because you have to keep running it if you're tired of doing it. I think the timing is best when you say, I think I've taken it as far as I can. I
Hmm.
think that I'd like my next challenge, and this is in a decent place to sell. The last thing I really want people to concentrate on when they're selling is the cash. But
Yeah.
inevitably, that's the big question. They want to know what they're going to walk away with. But if you like, I have a business, ironically, that's trying to sell right now that probably could wait a year and a half, keep running it, and he'd have the same money, could tank it. Some
Hmm.
people are willing to take less for a business because they don't want to be in a position where they have to hold on to it anymore, or maybe they can't hold on to it anymore. I mean, think about credit markets, Clearco, and all these companies that are doing short-term financing. That money is drying up, and
Yeah.
entrepreneurs that relied on that now have to find either conventional financing or something else at a high rate in a very difficult market. So I think a lot of entrepreneurs are really trying to hold on in 2023 and continue their business till the market improves and or the economy improves, which is really what's needed. But if you have a good business, it's not a lot different than 2020 or 2021,
Yeah.
because people are looking for good businesses.
Yes, 100%. And I think now, going back to the exit conversation, a lot of things I get also when talking to people. People ask me, okay, I want to exit my business, but at the same time, they start thinking about what are the factors that can help them get the highest multiple of valuation. And they start thinking, okay, maybe in Amazon, I feel I have done most of the things I can do. They start testing like Walmart, they start testing their own website, they start testing social media. And the reason why I bring this to the table to discuss with you is because I feel sometimes I have heard, and I want to hear your take on this. This not necessarily means it's going to argue a higher multiple valuation just for the sake of having external channels outside of Amazon. So, what is your experience with this? Is really that huge difference when it comes to proposing a business to an investor to have all these extra channels, or it's all about the actual efficiency and profitability these channels bring? Because you can have 100 channels, but if they don't actually bring the
Yeah.
money, what's the point?
I think
Yeah.
there's a couple ways to look at that. Number one, I don't think any buyers ever said you have too many verticals. Like you do
Okay.
Target and you do eBay, that's just not worth it. No one says that as a buyer. They'd like
Okay.
to see the wide opportunity. They like to see the scope of what something can have. But at the end of the day, it's about what you sell on either Shopify or Amazon. That's what 90% of this comes down to. 80-20 Amazon or 100% Amazon is what a lot of the aggregators have looked for, and it's a lot of what new buyers are looking for. Does that mean that Walmart and Target and all those other marketplaces don't matter? No, but that's what's going to drive the bus as far as understanding evaluation. The other markets, they know that they're going to get, and they're going to get some revenue for it, but it's not part of the decision making in the buyer, I don't think. Now, would they see it as an opportunity if you didn't have Walmart or Target or whatever the marketplaces are? Sure. So I don't think there's a negative either way to that. As long as your Amazon and Shopify are well oiled, then you're at 90% of your sales. I haven't even seen anyone come in with a significant Walmart presence or anything selling that's caused any kind of an issue.
Nice, nice. Now, when it comes to the type of businesses, also by talking to people, I have seen that certain aggregators, they are changing the type of categories they're focusing on. So I've been hearing lately a lot of people is focusing more towards baby, pets,
Yeah.
home, etc. And I wanted to hear if that's the same kind of behavior you're seeing with the clients you consult. Are you seeing like it's definitely a shift that is going up outside of more competitive categories such as supplements, electronics, and all of that, or you think there's still a big opportunity on those categories that we all know are becoming more and more competitive, saturated? Yeah.
That's a really good question. I mean, I think you mentioned them. I mean, pet,
Yeah.
child, home, all those are really simple. They're always going to be evergreens that people are going to want to buy
Hmm.
because you can be very creative in those spaces. Those are still the top ones. I think sometimes it matters a little more, how proprietary your product
Yeah.
is more than anything. Like if you're reselling a pet brand online,
Mm.
it's not
Yeah.
as good as having a proprietary, I don't know, dog bowl line, for
Yeah.
instance. So I think that it more depends on the moat around it, the protection of trademark and other things, and the strength of the business. I do think there's some verticals that have changed a little bit because 2020 definitely was like, I can remember 2020, anything you could do outside was selling like crazy. Like I sold a magnet fishing business. You know what magnet fishing is?
No, I've never heard of
Neither did I. I had no idea. Like, how do you catch a fish with a magnet? I don't understand.
that.
Then I met with a guy and it was about throwing these magnets into rivers and lakes and pulling up artifacts, bikes, all kinds
Okay.
of guns, like right off the edge. Police
Wow.
for that. I had no
Okay.
idea what it was. We ended up selling that business. I don't want to give the guy's number, but it was a hefty price. Then I turned around and sold another outdoor weightlifting equipment thing. So in 2020, all those things were moving. Anything you could do because everyone was home, everyone was,
Yeah.
putting on the mask for some reason, and they just all sold. Those spaces are still doing well, just not to the intensity level. Like I talked with a company this morning that had a dog line, and they're
Yeah.
back to the sales number they did pre-COVID. They had that same, then they had the bump, and now they're back to the normal number. Makes it look like a decline,
Yeah.
but it just became crazy what had happened in during that. So sometimes we're still dealing with COVID normalization in numbers, but the verticals are still very similar as that people want.
For sure. And that's interesting that you call it a COVID normalization. That's a good way to name it because yeah, sometimes when we have also meetings with our clients, we have seen that sometimes they have expectations related to COVID times, and the reality is that that's not the norm of the market. We definitely seen some decline across certain baselines in some categories, and it's something that for our listeners and viewers, important that you understand that if you are seeing that right now, it's not only you, it's the market that is basically normalizing after the basic explosion that happened on e-commerce due to COVID. Now,
I
some
think
people
one other thing
go on.
I think that people think that the aggregator model has changed multiples in the way
Yeah.
it has a little bit, but it's still more probably contributing to the strength of businesses being listed right now. Entrepreneurs are really tired. They're really tired. We had the
Yes.
import issue where containers were 5 times what they were the year
A
before.
mess.
Now we have an economy, whether you think the economy is good or bad, it's really not great. So you've got all these concurrent things that have happened over a year and a half or so, and all these entrepreneurs are just worn out. And that's where a lot of people are listing because there's too much strife in e-commerce now. The people that can wait that out are probably going to benefit very well.
For sure, for sure. Good to say that. Now, people that might be listening and watching this, they might wonder, okay, when is the right timing in terms of revenue and profitability? Because I know that right now, when it comes to the interest that investors and aggregators are having, is going a little bit higher. They are basically, I have seen from personal experience, and maybe you correct me here, that now they're focusing on bigger businesses and brands, like the smaller to medium. They're having less opportunity when it comes to exit. I'm feeling that, and I wanted to hear if that's the same you're feeling. Like, are you seeing that? And if so, what are the bandwidth in terms of revenue that you would advise people to, once they reach that bracket, to really think about exit based on the current panorama? Yeah.
I think that's a relative thing. I mean, look, I mean, at
Okay.
Flatlight, you know, typically if your profit, including ad backs, which would be like
Yeah.
salary, phone, things like that, is less than $60,000 to $80,000. It's hard to list only because it's such a niche sale and it's expensive fee against it. But
Yeah.
revenue is more tied to how the business is doing. Like, I like businesses that, you know, do 500,000 in revenue and make 120,000. Those are good businesses. But the way you got to think about it is you want to be on an increase, even if it's 5, 10, 12, 15%. I'm seeing a lot of businesses coming in 10, 20, 25, 30, 40% down a month. That's what
Mm-hmm.
you can have. So I think that size only matters in a sense of the trend. Because now, obviously, if you have a business making 100,000, it's going to be a different multiple than one making 500, which is a different multiple of one making 1,000,000. So the better that you do in your sales, the better your results going to be as the price. But we don't fear having small businesses coming in and listing them in the $150,000, $200,000 range. It just needs to be moving in a good direction. You hope to have a moat around it. You hope to have a trademark. There are 4 pillars of a sale. The first
Okay.
one is risk. Okay, so let's talk about risk. What's risky? Way too many SKUs or way too few SKUs would be risky.
Yeah.
Anything in the middle is better. If your sales are on a growth, that's a great thing. If they're on a decline, then it adds risk. The second is, well, I said risk. The second one's growth. I kind of went into that one. If you're having good growth, that's a positive. The third pillar is transferability. Most of our sellers don't have problems with transferability. They have a Shopify store, an Amazon store, maybe a trademark or whatever it's going to be, warehouse, 3PL, they have to move on. All those things matter. But if you have, let's say, a contract with a vendor that's only you that can deal with it and they don't want to deal with the next person, then you have transferability problems. Yeah. The last one is documentation. Make sure that your financials, your SOPs, and everything are in good order. If you do all those things and you're doing decent amount of sales and profit, you can still exit your business. And it's just a matter of who you work with. I think that the reason that Quiet Light's a little different for people is we're willing to have that hard conversation early. We're willing to turn down a listing to say you need 6 months to get better, you know, or you can go list with someone else. That if you think you can get it from someone else, great. But we don't want to put you in a position where you can fail by listing at the wrong amount. And I think sometimes people will listen to the wrong person with relation to valuation. They won't get a realistic valuation, and then they'll find out that they can't sell it. And that really hurts you going forward, because then you can't relist it in a good position. So sales matter, but it just needs to be on a decent trend.
Yeah, very good advice, Nado. And now, to conclude today's episode, another question I would like to pick your brain on is the type of exit we're seeing in 2023. So what I mean by this is, like, are you seeing right now that exits are more cash based, like a full exit, or you see more earn out within the formula? Are you seeing more and more common now, as you mentioned at the beginning, founders being part of the exit journey for the next 12 months afterwards? What are you seeing is the norm right now in 2023 when it comes to the setup of the exit for most businesses?
Well, you kind of got to push and pull in this. A lot of the deals you did in 2020, 2021, people didn't think about doing owner financing. They would do it immediately, or an equity roll, stability payments, things like that. And then they started not getting paid.
A lot of them.
Everyone knows this, that aggregators stopped paying some of those earnouts. As a matter of fact, I have 2 or 3 people that had to walk away from money because the business basically tanked. So I think that when you look at what kind of deal you're going to want, there's a lot of pushback on those stability notes, equity rolls, and seller notes. But now the SBA, if it's SBA pre-approved, is helping you in that They'll let you do a seller note inside an SBA deal, so you can still use the government's money to buy a business under that. You also have the ability to roll equity for that owner and maybe help them grow. So as an example, if I have a business that's on a 20 or 30% downturn, but it's a brand and it can turn around, maybe they're out of money, they don't have enough, you could take on a partner, hold 20%, sell part of it, and then when the business grows back, they can take a second exit and hopefully make more money for it. This is a great development in SBA to get eligible. So I think that it just really depends. If I'm seeing the kind of deals, matter of fact, I got an offer on a business I had yesterday. It was two structures. One of them had a 15% earnout and one had a 10% earnout. He gave the seller two options of what they'd like to do, and then obviously they can counter back. I think the best thing for any buyer to do is be flexible in terms of how you acquire the business and how you value the entrepreneur. Typically, if you're a buyer, the best thing you can do is be the nicest person he talks to, because money talks in a sense of a sale. No one really takes the lowest offer because they like the guy. But there are situations where they decide they want the entrepreneur and they go back and hard negotiate to try to work with the right person. So I think if you approach it that way, you be differential to the entrepreneur, you make sure that you understand that they're valued, and I think you can get any deal done. But I don't think the deal structure is a whole lot different than it was before, on different numbers.
Nice. Very good, Pat. So thank you very much for all the knowledge and insights. I appreciate it. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show. Yes. I want to use the last minute or so you can give us a little bit more about where people can reach out to you and quite light, because I'm pretty sure a lot of people may want to ask you questions or maybe get in contact with you to get a valuation and exit their business. So can you give us a little bit of that? Yeah.
Absolutely. And one thing I'll tell your listeners, a lot of times people don't want to be sold, so they don't reach out because they just don't want to have the hassle of someone emailing them. That's not what we do. What we think is that you need the perfect information. This is the biggest transaction most people ever have in their life.
For sure.
Think about it. Some people will sell a house. That's great. That's a big transaction, especially if you own it free and clear. But your business is probably the biggest transaction. So you want as much information around you as you can. The way that I approach my clients, you come in, we do a valuation, we get a simple report we need out of QuickBooks or whatever you use. We look at the business, quality, we look at the site, we look at Amazon, and then we do a simple meeting of here's where we think you are. Why that's important is you want to set a baseline and then a goal. Where's your goal and how are you going to get here? So we go through the financials. We tell you actionable tips, things we think can work. If you need referrals, we put you with people we know. So we try to help you get to the valuation you want. A lot of people think what we're going to do is try to sell you on listing your business. You'll know when it's right. So if people want to reach out to me, that's what we try to do, is give you the basic information you need and actionable tips to make it better. Whenever you're ready to list, if we're the people you use, great. So you can reach out to me at Quiet Light. It's Pat, P as in Paul, A as in Apple, T as in Tom, at quietlight.com. And I'm happy to talk to you about anything, give you any resources we can get. We have 14 amazing advisors. If you just went into the site and filled out an info form about listing your business, you may get another guy. We have so many smart people. It's unbelievable. We have two guys who wrote best-selling books. We have two of the smartest ladies I've ever seen that are advisors. Just an amazing group. You'll be in good hands at Quiet Light either way.
Awesome, Pat. I appreciate your time and thank you for being here, and looking forward to have you in the next one for sure. This is something that for sure every single year we're going to have a new conversation about this very interesting topic. So can't wait to have you again. Yeah.
we can do that and talk about the e-com side sometime.
Yeah, let's do it. Thank you, Pat. It's been a pleasure. Bye-bye. See you.
Appreciate it.